My name is Renee Williams, and welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Billy and is not here because he is doing a prescribed burn with a lot of our team, like Dr. Crocker, Dr. Matt Springer. All of those are pretty much out there, and maybe I'll get him to kind of fill us in next week about kind of what he learned and maybe some tips and tricks. But we greatly appreciate you joining us this week, and happy Invasive Species Week. It's Invasive Species Awareness Week, and I know for some of the people that you're going to be seeing, it's probably Invasive Species Awareness Day every day. But we just wanted to kind of touch on that, kind of what is an invasive species? What can you learn about that? Do you want them in your woods? Do you not? We have several guests, and one, Dr. Ellen Crocker, is on with us just to kind of get us started. She's our forest health specialist, so I wanted her to at least start it out. Now I know you're at the burn site as well, and we greatly appreciate you just joining in us for 5 minutes or so, just to kind of tell us a little bit about invasive species and what they are, and why people don't want them.
Wonderful. Yeah. And so today we are out here learning about prescribed fire. We're not doing a burn yet, but
Oh,
an
not a burn yet.
eight-hour
Okay.
course that prepares people to go out and be crew members on some burns.
Mhm.
So I'm here with a lot of extension folks, people from Fish and Wildlife, and more. And, I'm interested in it because prescribed fire is definitely a tool in a forest health toolkit,
Oh, okay.
including management of invasive species, which we're going to talk about today. But yes, this is Invasive Species Awareness Week. And, in my hat as forest health specialist, I think that invasive species are probably the number one issue here in Kentucky and beyond in terms of things that are really impacting the health of our forests and our trees, whether that's invasive insects and pathogens that are directly killing trees, that are impacting value, that are changing things really fundamentally, to invasive plants that might be smothering areas, might be reducing regeneration, decreasing the health and vigor of
Mm.
our forests. So, a really important topic. And something that I think this time of year, as we head into spring, a lot of people are thinking about planting seeds and planting trees. Well, it's
Mm.
also a really great time to be out there scouting for invasive species. And if you can find them, reporting them, controlling them, managing them to have an impact in your woods.
So for some, it's better to try to find them now, right? Because they're green.
It totally depends. And,
Uh-huh.
all throughout the year, there is, different things that it might be a good time to look for. Right now would be a really good time to scout for some of those invasive plants that are evergreen or maybe greening up before our native species. Some of the insects that we're going to hear about today, some of the other species as well. So, I know that today we're going to go through some of the most damaging invasive species here in Kentucky and some things to have on your radar.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we can go ahead and get started if you want to have Alexandra turn your
Oh,
camera on.
yes. So, Alexandra Blevins, we are so happy to have you joining
Yay!
us to talk about
Woo.
invasive species. And, you are forest health with the Division of Forestry. So, a perfect person to also be thinking about, invasives and the impact they're having.
Yes, I think Renee said it the best. Invasive Species Awareness Week is more like Invasive Species Awareness 365 days out of the year when it
Probably for
comes.
both of you.
Well, and I'm just seeing your slide now. Oh,
There
it
we go.
looks wonderful. It looks
Oh, that's a
terrifying.
creepy guy.
Yeah, I love that, but I also don't like it at all.
Right.
So just a little bit of background on Alexandra for anybody who doesn't already know her. She is the Forest Health Program Coordinator with Kentucky Division of Forestry. She started her career with the division in 2017 on the hemlock treatment crew, which, if you don't know about them, it's a wonderful group that the division leads, and it meant that Alexandra was hiking up and down the hills of eastern Kentucky treating hemlock trees for the invasive and deadly hemlock woolly adelgid, which I bet she'll tell you about later. Then in 2019, she moved into the forest health specialist position, where she was chasing down all sorts of different forest health threats, invasive insects, diseases and plants across the Commonwealth. And then more recently in 2022, Alexandra became the program coordinator of the Forest Health program there. And she's been really growing that program and expanding some of the work that they're doing. So we are so happy to have you on today, Alexandra, and look forward to hearing more about invasive species. You know, every day is Invasive Species Awareness Day for us, but it's always a really good reminder to be on the lookout for these
Mhm.
invasives.
I couldn't have said it any better, Ellen. And so, yes, thank you to Renee and to Ellen for the wonderful introduction and the invitation to speak to everyone today. And so, without further ado, I'm so glad that we have everyone here to really get into the nitty-gritty of invasives. So, here, hopefully, I haven't scared anybody off. Renee and Ellen made some comments. This is Invasive. This is the mascot for the USDA's Hungry Pests campaign. And so, yeah, he's a pretty scary dude. He is made up of all different various types of invasive forest pests. You can see his nails there look like they're made from the hemp, or excuse me, the emerald ash borer, and his little bow tie might be the spongy moth. And so, you know, when we get to talking about invasives and the impacts that they have on a landscape level, not only here in Kentucky, but across the world, it can be really scary. But when we take the time, like this week, to educate ourselves and educate others and gain that knowledge and really learn the best management practices for these invasives, it becomes a little less scary. And so I hope with today's uh, program here that everyone can, feel a bit more at ease and hopefully learn a new tactic to combat these invasive species. And so it was already mentioned, this is why we're all here today. And all of this week is National Invasive Species Awareness Week. So if you didn't know this before now, or maybe knew about it but haven't really taken the time to look into this, please do a quick Google search and you'll find this web page. And also take to social media. Lots of folks are posting. I myself have made a post every day and will continue to do so through the remainder of the week on invasive species, what they are, and how everyone can do their part. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and pledge your support. So, sometimes it can be a bit difficult when we talk about invasive species. Sometimes it can be a real head scratcher. And, I sometimes have days where I feel like these poor little kiddos, where I'm just giving myself a headache thinking about invasives. And so, before we really dive into the bulk of the material, we're going to define what the heck these things are. And so, definitions, you might not think that they're the most important thing in the world, but in educating folks, not only ourselves, but spreading knowledge, we want to make that as easy as possible. So having these standard set of definitions and the words that we use, it really makes that transfer of knowledge, as easy as it can be. And so we're going to start off by, getting some definitions, laying the groundwork for these terms. And we're going to start off with native. So you may think of yourself as a Kentucky native, and you can kind of think of our invasives and natives in the same general way, with a couple extra key ingredients. And so native species are those that have been a part of the balance of nature over thousands or hundreds of thousands of years in a particular region or ecosystem. And so, to really break down the key takeaways for our native species, is that they're originally from said area and they have a very niche environment that they fulfill a certain role in. And the example that I would like to use is our beautiful native bald cypress trees. They're very unique, and I'm just really fond of them. So I figured, why not? And so, how can we determine that bald cypress is an actual native species to the Commonwealth of Kentucky? Well, if you do some quick searching, I was able to pull this from the National Tree Atlas. And so this is compiled geographic information of, multiple different types of native tree species, and it will pull up their historic distribution maps. And so you can see Kentucky there, the far western portion of Kentucky. That is where you will find bald cypress in their native habitat where they're happy and healthy. And so in the Jackson Purchase area, if you haven't been out to far western Kentucky, it's like a whole different world out there. It gets real swampy real quick. But that's what bald cypress love. And so that is why they're specific to that area. Now, when we talk about non-native species, of course, these are going to be the opposite. They do not naturally occur in these areas that you found them in. And it's most likely due to an introduction, either deliberate or accidental. So, us kind of moving things around. And so, yet again, when we talk about, the key takeaways with this definition, they're not originally from said area, but they also don't necessarily cause harm. And so this will be very important when we talk about invasives up next. But before we dive into that definition, a really cool example. I don't know if there's any more gardeners out there that are itching to get their hands dirty, but I myself, I can't wait until we get the soil thawed out and I can go plant some more bulbs in my flower beds. But tulips, they are a prime example of a non-native species. So you can see the distribution map. Tulips are originally from the Eurasia area. You can see highlighted in red, but they have been moved around. I think a lot of folks think of, Holland and that area for the fields of tulips that they have and all the wonderful images. And so, those natives were then transplanted and moved. And then we got all the wonderful cultivars of different colors and shapes and varieties that we can now find, at our local stores here in Kentucky and all over the world. But they are not originally from here, but I think we can almost all agree that we're not concerned that tulips are going to escape our flower beds. And so that's what we're really getting to the point of is that, they're not going to have some unexpected outcome that could be harmful to the environment. And so that brings us into our invasive definition. And so, just like non-natives, they're don't naturally occur in the areas that they're found in, but they have the addition of the likelihood to cause harm either through environmental harm, economic harm, or even harm to our own well-being. And so, yet again, the two key takeaways is it's not native to the area and it can cause harm. So this additional facet of the harm that they can cause, that's really where we get into the weeds of the matter. And so a lot of you probably know what this example pictured here is. Kudzu, the vine that ate the South. I mean, in all reality, this invasive plant is kind of a disaster. This poor gentleman is trying to dig his car out of a kudzu patch. Right below that, you can see a house that's been completely submerged in kudzu vine. And they can also take over things like our power line or infrastructure systems, as well as entire forests and their canopies. And they can bring things down. They can bring trees down due to the weight and the sheer mass of all of that foliage draping over them. And so there's whole books written about this invasive plant. And lots of things that you can find online for this invasive plant as well. And so, houses, infrastructure, trees, and vehicles beware. This vine is coming for you. And so, why do we spend all of this time creating these definitions? Why do words matter? And it's because, we can really get ourselves into a pickle when we're trying to educate folks and we're not using the right terminology. And just like with, other areas of study, I'm a bug lady at heart. And so entomology, the study of insects, has its own jargon. Invasive plants and invasive species in general have their own jargon. And so, for the transfer of knowledge and making it as easy as possible, it's the best practice to use these standardized terms. And so, things that we want to avoid using when we're discussing invasive species are these loaded terms, things that can have, maybe a negative connotation already associated with them, or maybe they have multiple meanings and it's just, what is this lady talking about? Um, and so things that you want to try to avoid using, if you can remember to do so. So when we're talking about invasives, try not to use the word alien because depending on what crowd or audience you might be speaking to, you never know. They might be thinking you're talking about plants coming from outer space. Or, just terms in general that have multiple meanings or maybe a negative connotation, try to avoid those. Another key example of words to try to avoid, and I myself in the past have definitely been a culprit to use exotic, and I now know that I should try to avoid that. And this is due to the fact that, sometimes when folks are talking about exotic, maybe a beach vacation somewhere on a private island, I mean, that sounds really awesome to me. But we don't want to give the false impression that when we're talking about invasives, that they might somehow be, exotic and unique. So another word to try to avoid. And of course, everyone slips up every once in a while, so I'll go ahead and apologize just in case I let one of those slip out when I'm talking about my favorite topic of bugs. Um, and then the last one, a native invasive. So this one is kind of a head scratcher within itself. It's a true oxymoron. And the fact that, you're trying to say that, something that is originally from the area, it's also invasive, which means it's non-native. It's a whole debacle within the term itself. And so it is important to mention that we do have native plants that will act as if they're invasive. Maybe they are really good at outcompeting other native species because they have a stronger growth or faster growth, or maybe they develop a larger seed set. So, there are natives that have certain qualities of invasives, but we want to make sure that we're not confusing people by using such terms. And I know I'm not the best when it comes to defining and sticking to them, but if you really want the best information out there, you can follow this QR code and it'll take you to a wonderful publication that was put together by none other than Dr. Ellen Crocker, Dr. Matt Springer, and a wonderful individual, Franny Preston, who is actually going to be talking with us today as well. And I bet she would have done a way better job than me at covering this information. But this is a publication that will describe everything that I covered and even more in a lot more detail. So definitely give that a quick look whenever you get the chance. And so now that we have gone through and defined those terms, we're going to jump into our three major areas of invasives. So the first of which is invasive plants. And so invasives, they come in all shapes and sizes. We have invasive plants, we have invasive insects, and we have invasive pathogens that we're going to touch on today. But now that we've gone over those definitions, we can hopefully better describe what invasive plants are. And so remember, they're not native to the area. That's the one key facet. And the second, which is the most important, is that they are harmful. And that could be impacts to the environment, the economy, or our own well-being and human health. And some other key characteristics of invasive plants that we'll get even further into are that they can survive and even thrive in completely new environments to them. And this allows them to outcompete our native plants with ease. And so now we're going to talk about these areas of harmful impacts. The first of which is the harm to our environment. So, Ellen mentioned that invasive plants, they can smother out our native communities. That's an aspect in which these native plants can, or excuse me, invasive plants can harm our environments. But another key example in a way that maybe many did not know that they could do is through actual chemical complexes that they can exude, such as these allelopathic chemicals. And so our invasive bush honeysuckle is a prime example of that. And so in this image depiction here, the donor plant would be a myrrh honeysuckle, and these plants will actually exude these chemicals into the soil and plants that surround them. So say, for instance, maybe this receiver plant is a spice bush, a native spice bush plant. They could reduce their vigor and have actual physical, visual impacts that you can see due to these chemicals that are being exuded by the invasive bush honeysuckle. They can also get into waterways, and there's lots of ways that they can cause trickle-down impacts. And so a key example of how these invasive plants can harm our environment, maybe that you didn't even know about. All right, moving on to our second harmful impact. These things can be deadly even. And so the prime example here is the invasive poison hemlock plant. And so not only is it deadly if it's ingested, but it can also be cause harm through exposure through your skin. So you definitely want to wear proper PPE when you are working with this invasive plant, and it can also be harmful to, I've had calls about sheep eating poison hemlock. So watch out for your pets and your cattle and other animals and critters that you're caring for, because this can have really severe impacts to not only human health, but other animals as well. And, something else that we should be cognizant of are the harm to culturally significant plants. A lot of the work that I am doing at the moment with some of the national grant opportunities, they're opened up to tribal lands as well. And so we want to remember that the history of our tribal nations and the connections that they have with plants, and not only Native American populations, but there are other populations that have strong connections to native plants that maybe they use for ceremonies or for homeopathic medicines. And so, when we get the domination of these invasive plant invasions, it can really hinder, all native plant communities, including these sacred and medicinal plants as well. So this slide, I know it's a bit lengthy, but it really does highlight all of the different ways that these invasive plants can outcompete our native communities and even compromise the floral and faunal communities that live within these ecosystems. And so, just going down the list, most invasive plant species, they are prolific seed producers. We're talking about thousands of seed. They can also be fast growing and aggressive spreaders. And so they're going to dominate the landscape as they build up their populations. And these two facts makes it very hard and difficult to eradicate these species. And when we talk about not only invasive plants, but when we talk about invasive insects here momentarily, a key thing to keep in mind that since they aren't originally from these areas in which they're found, they have no natural predators. So there's nothing within the natural balance to keep them in check. And so that's why we have to work so hard to try to eradicate or control them. And as I mentioned before, these invasive plants can survive and even thrive in all different kinds of environments, and even in highly disturbed areas where other native species wouldn't want anything to do with those areas, that the invasive species can really, just take advantage of that. And lastly, they can reproduce and regrow in a variety of different ways. So we're not talking about, your run-in-the-mill seed dispersal to create new plants on the landscape, but even, little fragments of some of these plants, if they were to, find some footing and get their roots down in there, they can start a whole new population. And so, through all of these reasons, and I'm sure there's probably some more, these plants are really capable of destroying ecosystems. And so invasives, a prime example of how, this can really get to those trickle down effects to affect things like our early season pollinators. You can see one of our bees getting at that red bud down in the corner there. Our native red buds are a integral food source for our, pollinators when there's at a time when there's not a whole lot out there for them. And so if we were to have invasive plants, kind of knock back our native redbud population, so that isn't a resource for our pollinators anymore, that could have really detrimental trickle down effects. And so there are many other examples of this, but just one that I chose to highlight. And then, of course, we can't forget the economic impacts here. And so I definitely would not want this to be my backyard. This is a image of a couple of houses that are just completely chock full of kudzu up until, basically coming right up to their doorstep. And so, of course, they're just not supposed to be here. And when you look out at that image, I mean, that's a headache and a half. I wouldn't even, even in my profession, I'd be, feeling kind of like I want to pull my hair out. Um, and so, they cost big bucks to eradicate, and it's a lot of work. So, can't forget about the money aspect there. And so, now that you have heard all this information and all the impacts that these invasive plants can have, where do you begin? It can be kind of really daunting to try to figure out where to even start. And so I like mnemonic devices, and of course, you can make your own, but we're going to talk about setting goals, making priority areas, coming up with your game plan, implementing or taking action, and then, of course, one of the most crucial, the monitoring and the follow-up. And so GPPIM, my mnemonic is Great Plants Provide Impeccable Muse. And so you're more than welcome to come up with your own, but that's what I came up with on the fly. So, of course, setting your goals. The goal is eradication. Sometimes that might be an overarching goal. Maybe you want to try to just control a certain area and work up to eradication. So these are things that can, definitely want to try to take baby steps with. And so that being the overarching goal is, control working towards removal and hopefully full eradication. You're going to want to set some priority areas because if you work, on your whole property, that might be, pretty daunting. But if you set priority areas, it's a good place to start and take some baby steps and, do a chunk at a time. And so we have some really good examples here. And that is if you have maybe a stream bank that is running through your property, it would be a really good idea to start in that riparian habitat. And the reason for that is that, of course, as water flows, things can flow with it. And so, those seeds, roots, and even those plant fragments that break off of invasive plants can float downstream and create new populations and new problems. So we don't want to be sending our problems downstream. And so this is why riparian habitats are one of those key priority areas. Another one that I wanted to touch on are the forest edge habitats. So maybe you have some pasture land that abuts next to one of your woodlands. And so these are also really integral areas to start treatment because invasive plants really love that forest edge where they can get the maximum sunlight, but they use it to their advantage. They'll start along that forest edge, but then they can start creeping in to your woodland through that. And so if you can tackle the forest edge first, it'll make things a whole lot easier moving forward. All right. So this is where you get your hands dirty and get to work. So implementation. So making that plan and taking action. This can come in many different forms and fashions. There is mechanical removal, so things such as mowing and weed wrenching. You can get down on your hands and knees and pull with your hands if it's of appropriate size. And so I know there's days when I just have a lot of rage and I need to work out some of that aggression on some little bush honeysuckle saplings. And you can do a pretty efficient job as long as they're not too big with hand pulling. But then, we have the arsenal of chemical application. And so I know this can sometimes be a little scary for folks, but when used properly, things such as herbicides as well as pesticides, when we'll get into the invasive insect portion of today's talk, they can be wonderful tools for your toolbox. And so, remember, when you're using these, to be very familiar with what you're using. Know that the label is the law. It will tell you everything that you need to know when it comes to using whatever product that you've chosen. And PPE, so personal protective equipment, you want to make sure that you've got all your exposed areas protected, especially your eyes and your hands. So wearing gloves and safety glasses. And then most labels will tell you long sleeves, long pants, shoes, and socks. Um, and so there's lots of other really nifty tools out there on the market for really honing in on your applications. And so, like the little bingo dabbers or the buckthorn blasters are very, very nice to use. Hand sprayers, those are very nice to use as well to really have a focused application. And so, yeah, just take some time before you actually get started to do the research and figure out what is the best approach. And so, other things that you can do that will really help the situation is, of course, first of all, is to know your plants. Work on your ID skills. There's lots of different applications out there, iNaturalist, Seek, and things that, you can take a picture of a plant and it'll, get you pretty darn close to what it is. And so, knowing your plants, as they say, you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. When you start to get really good at plant ID, and this goes for other organisms as well, you can know, hey, there's another, winter creeper, one of our notorious invasive plants. And when you see it pop up in a new area, then you can say, aha, I'm going to get that one next time. And so, other things you can do, you can volunteer with a local group. And so, we have a wonderful organization here in Kentucky, the Invasive Plant Council. They're always looking for new members. And so, you can reach out to those folks, and I'm sure they could, have an event that you could attend and help out with. And we also have the first ever Kentucky-led SISMA, or Cooperative Invasive Species Management Area, out of the Louisville metro area. It's called the Derby City SISMA. And they are putting together a Facebook page as we speak, so be on the lookout for them. And they are going to have a whole calendar full of events that you can join this coming season. And then, maybe you don't want to do this as a group. Maybe you just want to start your own removal project. And so that's perfectly fine as well, to tackle something on your own property and work at your own pace. And then, of course, if you see something, say something. Education and knowledge is power, and the more that we share that, it is going to do us all some good. So once you have learned your plant ID, teach someone else about how to ID invasive plants. And then maybe if you're starting your own removal project on your property and you have an adjacent neighbor, maybe you could peek over the fence and see that, they're most likely going to have an invasive plant issue as well. And so, you could spark up a conversation and tell them about everything that you've learned, and maybe they would be interested to hop on board too and help out with the removal. And then if you really want to get super specific, you can do things like build a boot brush station, and these will actually physically hinder the dispersal of seed from these invasive plants. So these are just a couple examples to get things going in your neck of the woods. And so I mentioned the Invasive Plant Council. And so here you can see the landing page for their brand new website. I would encourage all of you to please check it out. As I mentioned, they will post events that you are more than welcome to join in on. You can become a member here. They also have lots of wonderful resources just a click away, some of which they just revamped the field guide to Kentucky native plants. These are awesome. Get one while you can. And then they also have other really neat resources, such as this brochure on native alternatives to invasive plants. So once you get going and you're starting to remove invasive plants from an area, you're probably thinking you want to put something back in its place. And so why not put something native there? And we have lots of beautiful, beautiful natives to choose from. And so if you follow that QR code at the page, at the bottom of the page there, that will take you directly to that website and you can start checking it out. All right. So we're going to get into the topic of invasive insects. And I wanted to say, I know I didn't go into any invasive plant species specifically. That's just because the sheer volume of them that we have here in the state. And so if you're looking for specific information on a specific invasive plant, that Kentucky Invasive Plant Council website will get you where you need to be. And so just so you know, in thinking to keep time to talk about these other two topics, I apologize that I didn't get into every single invasive plant, but believe me, that would probably take all week instead of just an hour. Of course, if you're looking or having trouble finding any information that you're looking for a specific plant, you can always reach out to me and I'll get you where you need to be as well. And so, without further ado, my favorite topic are I'm the resident bug lady here at the office. And so, we're going to dive into invasive insects. And so, while we still have an army of them, we are going to touch on some key invasive insects to the state of Kentucky that are really causing some deadly impacts in our forestlands. And so we have things such as the yellow poplar weevil, we got oak slugs, we've got the locust leaf miner, there's the emerald ash borer, hemlock woolly adelgid, and the red bay ambrosia beetle. So these are all insect pests that can have impacts, but some of them are native and some of them are not native. So let's get into some definitions again. And so, when we talk about native versus non-native pests, it's going to be very similar in some of the descriptors when we talk about invasive plants. And so, remember, if it's native, it has historically been found in the area and it has its niche. And that's going to be the same when we talk about these forest pests. And so, in the upper image there, that is the eastern tent caterpillar. And so this is a native forest pest that loves black cherry, and we see impacts from it along the interstates almost every year. But the trees have co-evolved with this insect, and so they really know how to deal with it pretty well. And we haven't really seen black cherry mortality due to this defoliation. But other native insects, such as that yellow poplar weevil, as well as the locust leaf miner from that last slide, those are also native. And so they cause minor damage when we're putting it on a scale with our invasive insects. They really just don't compare to the invasive species impacts. And they typically will occur in cycles. So, 1 year you'll see, a lot of damage, and then they kind of disappear for a couple years and then they'll pop back up again. And then, as with the eastern tent caterpillar, a lot of them are defoliators or they add some additional stress to the tree, but the trees are pretty capable of keeping up with them. And they have this limited scale and severely lessened impacts when we talk about the next group, the non-native invasives. And so our example here is spongy moth, the spongy moth caterpillar. And so this is such a big impact that there is a whole program, the Slow the Spread program, just for this insect. And that's because it is invasive. It can cause severe, widespread impacts across the landscape by defoliating all of our wonderful oak species, and that is very concerning. And so I refer to these as our heavy hitters. And so not only spongy moth, but the hemlock woolly adelgid and of course the emerald ash borer are also invasive non-native pests that we'll touch on. And so these have the ability to cause, those large scale impacts with really like a lot of damage that you can see up in a plane. And there's the potential for mass mortality. So these are actual tree killers, or they have the potential to be. And then, there's the potential for widespread distribution. And so, a lot of the times when we're looking for impacts from these invasive pests, that is one of the manners in which we'll do it. We'll do aerial detection surveys up in a plane, and you can see the impacts up in the air. So that's pretty amazing stuff to think about. And so, now that we've gone over those two definitions for our native versus non-native invasive pests, we're really going to talk about and hone in on these invasive pests issue. So you may be wondering how, if they're not supposed to be here, how did they get here? And so this is one of the ways in which this can occur. You know, we're living in modern times and we all have the modern goods that we use day in and day out, and they come to us from here, there, and everywhere on these big cargo ships. And inside each one of these containers, you could have materials such as these. You've got wood dunnage, you've got pallets material, any kind of wood material, these invasives can kind of hide away in there. And then what do you know? It just takes one of them to escape and wreak havoc on our environment. And so that is one of the ways that these insects can get here. So now we're going to touch on a couple of the culprits, and probably the most notorious, the most infamous invasive forest pest is the emerald ash borer. You know, it's been around I want to say more than 20 years now, but there's still folks that may not know what it is. And so I want to take that into consideration and let everyone know. So the adult form, while it is beautiful, jewel beetle, this is a deadly invasive insect. And so the adults aren't really the major culprit here. It's the juvenile form, which you can see highlighted in this red circle here. That is the grub of the emerald ash borer. And what you will notice in these images here, they feed beneath the bark in the living tissue of the tree. They will go back and forth, growing as they feed, making these serpentine galleries or S-shaped galleries. If you were to have just one of these in a tree, um, you know, it would most likely not kill that ash tree. But it's when you see the impact in that second image there of all the galleries coalescing and forming together, and these will physically girdle the tree. And so it's when you have a mass aggregation, lots of these larvae in one tree is where we see the real mortality occur. And these insects can kill trees, you know, in less than 10 years when their numbers really build up in the tree. And so, how do you know if your ash have emerald ash borer? A really quick check that you can do is to walk your woods, of course, find your ash trees, and then do a quick circle around them and look for these D-shaped exit holes. And so, they're pretty easy to see with the naked eye, and not a whole lot of other insect species or native insect species will create that D-shaped exit hole. So if you're seeing that, you know, you most likely have an EAB infestation. And I'll mention it over and over again, but if you need any type of assistance with tree ID, determining whether or not you may have an invasive on your property, the KDF, our Forest Health Program, we provide free technical assistance to every Kentucky citizen. It doesn't matter what county you're in, we cover all 120, and we'll come out and perform a free site visit for you and get you the information that you need. And so, how bad is it when it comes to EAB in Kentucky? So here you can see our most up-to-date detection map. And unfortunately, I say this with a heavy heart, we have lost the battle to the emerald ash borer. We only have 10 Western Kentucky remaining counties that have been untouched by this invasive pest. And unfortunately, in the coming years, we'll probably tick these off as well. And so it is still moving westward. And so if you happen to be in any of those unhighlighted counties and you notice that your ash are looking a little poorly, please give us a call and we can come and make that determination for you. So moving right along, as Ellen mentioned, this is how I got started in my career path with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. I was on a field crew that's pretty much all we did was treat our eastern hemlock trees for this culprit, the hemlock woolly adelgid. And so, yet again, it really kind of blows my mind that these tiny little insects can have such a big impact, but they sure do. And so, um, in within that red circle, you see kind of that little football shaped thing. That is the adelgid. And when it comes into the winter months, they will put on this waxy, woolly secretion that makes them look like little tiny cotton balls that you can see in the bottom image there. And what they do, they're like little couch potatoes. They will find their little spot at the base of a hemlock needle and they will stay there and literally suck the will to live from our precious hemlock trees. And, the devastating image to the right there of that hemlock graveyard, that is where these trees were not treated and they succumbed to HWA mortality. And just like EAB, these insects can kill a hemlock tree within 10 years or less. And so this is, creates a major landscape level impact. And when we're talking about hemlocks, they are a foundational species and where they're found, and lots of things depend on them. And so when we're, having these landscape level impacts to really critical native species, it has a major trickle down effect. And so this is one of the key programs within our forest health program with KDF is keeping this treatment program alive. And so you may be wondering if you're affected by hemlock woolly adelgid. And so here you can see the infestation map for HWA. And so, mind you, the native eastern hemlock population map, if we were to overlay it, it would pretty much cover about 98% of the area that we're seeing. We also do have a isolated pocket of eastern hemlock trees in the Mammoth Cave area, and we consistently check up on those trees almost every year with our friends out at the national park to make sure that HWA hasn't found their way into those populations. And so, if you live in one of these highlighted counties or surrounding counties and you know that you have hemlock or need some help determining whether or not you have hemlock and then HWA, yet again, give us a call and we can help you out. And so, the newest addition to the invasive species crew is, of course, the spotted lanternfly. So this one has been receiving a lot of media attention as of late, and which is wonderful because it helps to spread the word about these new invasives. And so you may have seen this one already. You may have even seen it in your own yard. And it is on the move, folks. And so what we're seeing here, yet again, this is an invasive, non-native, hails from the Orient, like a lot of our other invasive forest pests. And you can see the adult as well as the juvenile form, and then their mass aggregate feeding behavior on the bole of that tree. And so, as with a lot of our other invasive insect pests, they gather in numbers when they feed. It's almost a defensive mechanism. And so they will use their piercing, sucking mouth parts to steal nutrients from the trees. And it goes even further than that. They, as they're feeding, they will excrete honeydew, which is just a fancy term for, bug excrement pretty much. And so they're raining down honeydew as they're feeding. And then this honeydew will then turn into black sooty mold. The black sooty mold will then attract your stinging insects such as bees and wasps. So this is a real nuisance situation that we got going on here with spotted lanternfly. And so while the research thus far is telling us that they aren't necessarily tree killers, they can have, severe impacts and even mortality in certain systems. So if you have fruit trees or grapevines, or if you're an owner of an orchard or a vineyard here in Kentucky, you definitely want to keep an eye out for this pest because it will have, probably the most severe impacts to those two industries. And even if you have, just your own little orchard going on, you definitely want to be on the lookout for these pests in your orchard as well. And then a fun fact about the spotted lanternfly, it is actually strongly associated with another one of our invasives, the invasive plant tree of heaven. And so this insect and tree of heaven come from the same area, and so it will seek out tree of heaven. And I'm pretty sure that's what this photo is of, a tree of heaven bowl with all of the spotted lanternfly adults on there. And so if we can try to use this as some leverage, if you find tree of heaven on your property, then if you eradicate it, that could inhibit, fingers and toes crossed, from spotted lanternfly making its way onto your property. So just something to keep in your back pocket. And so just how bad is it? So with spotted lanternfly, it was first detected in 2023, that tiny little blue county of Gallatin County. And since then, it has been spreading like wildfire, you all. In 2024, 7 new counties added to the map, and just last year, 8 new counties added to the map. And we can only predict that this exponential expansion will continue to happen. This is a regulated pest by the USDA APHIS, but here in Kentucky, the spread is already so bad, we're not quite sure how we're going to try to regulate this in the state. And so the best options for you are, if you see it, say something. And so you can use this Report a Pest hotline. And this is a partnership. The Office of the State Entomologist, they're the ones handling this culprit. And so if you notice this in either its juvenile or adult form, please report to that Report a Pest hotline. And so, going back through the motions of how do you even begin when it comes to these pest issues, these invasive pest issues, use the little phrase again, the mnemonic. You're going to want to set goals. You're going to want to make priority areas, come up with your game plan, and then take action through implementation and continue to monitor. So, although we're dealing with different types of organisms, you can follow the same guidelines. Of course, the goal is to keep the invasive pests out of an area if they aren't there so beforehand, or if you already have them in your trees, then you can take action to control them or eradicate them. And so, depending on which two of those options you choose, your priority areas may be different. If you happen to find, say, the hemlock woolly adelgid in your woodland, your priority area will most likely be to treat the trees that you found those insects on and those surrounding them. If you have ash trees that look pristine, like they don't have EAB, you're probably going to want to keep them that way. And so you can come at this from multiple different perspectives. And then make your plan. So, are you going to do things such as silvicultural control, chemical control, biocontrol? You have lots of different options in the toolbox when it comes to invasive pests as well, just like your toolbox for invasive plants. And then, depending on what you chose, you're going to take action. You can get out there and treat your trees, whether that's preventative or to do, the culling of whatever insect that you have. And then, of course, just as with invasive plants, you're going to want to follow up. The monitoring is key. Once you eradicate something, there's always a slight chance that it could come back, especially when we're dealing with these tiny little bugs. And so, monitoring, double checking, triple checking years and years out just to make sure that your area is in the free and clear is always a good thing to keep in mind. And I did see your hand raised, but we're all good, maybe? Um, and so some resources from the Kentucky Division of Forestry that will help you through these endeavors when it comes specific to the invasive forest pests. If you follow this QR code, it will take you to our web page for the Forest Health Program, and you can find these two really helpful documents. We just updated our landowner guide to protect your ash from the emerald ash borer. And also on the webpage, you can find the hemlock guide for landowners to treat for HWA. And so these are, a one-page document or a couple pages with, 5 steps or less that you can easily, digest and get to work. And so I encourage you to check those two items out. And as we're coming to the end of today's time, I did want to talk just a little bit on invasive pathogens. As I mentioned, invasives are all different shapes and sizes, come in all different forms and fashions. And we do actually have invasive tree diseases here in Kentucky. And there's two that we monitor for on a regular basis. And so the first of which is laurel wilt disease. And so this pathogen is deadly. It's a tree killer, and it is moved around by a tiny little red bay ambrosia beetle. So not only the insect, but also the pathogen that it's carrying around are invasive. And so this is referred to as an insect disease complex, where the insect carries around the deadly pathogen in the form of a fungus. And so the insect itself will carry around the fungal pathogen, and all as it takes is one of these beetles to bore into sassafras or spicebush here in the state of Kentucky. Those are the two, natives that we're highly concerned about. And one beetle, it'll bore in and it will inoculate that tree or bush. And, within a year or two, you're going to see mortality. And so things to look for, definitely probably don't want to look for this tiny little beetle because they could have a whole slew of them fly in front of your face and you probably wouldn't even realize it. But things that you can look for, major red flag, if your sassafras tree or your spicebush plant is looking very, very sad, the leaves are drooping, and it's not the right time for, water stress to be happening, you might have laurel wilt on your hands. You can also look for signs from the beetles, from where they bore in. They will make these frass toothpicks that you can see over here. But don't get your hopes up or don't hold your breath because a slight little wind could go by or a little drizzle of rain, and those would just turn into sawdust at the base of the tree. So the main thing to definitely keep an eye out for are water stressed looking sassafras and spicebush. If their leaves completely go brown and are desiccated and still hanging on, definitely give us a call and we can come out and do some further investigation for you. But if you're feeling really gung-ho and you want to hatch it and you need to put it to work, you can do some destructive sampling to look for that iconic staining that really is indicative of laurel wilt that you can see in that bottom image there. But we can also help with that as well. And then up next, we have thousand cankers disease. So yet again, this is an insect disease complex with a separate beetle, the walnut twig beetle being the primary vector. And just as with laurel wilt, these beetles will carry within them the lethal fungal pathogen. And so the beetles will seek out juglin species. So black walnut is one that we're really concerned about here in Kentucky. And they will bore into the twigs kind of at a top-down approach. And as they bore in, they're inoculating those twigs and stems with the canker disease. And so this one is more of a gradual killer. It happens over several years, but as you can see, the cankers will kind of multiply and form larger cankers, and then you're going to get branch dieback, and that'll eventually, go down to the main stem, and you will have a dead tree on your hands. And so I am proud to say that we have yet to find this in Kentucky. So one that we don't have on our list as of yet, but we do monitor for this every single year. So yet again, I'm going to throw out my pitch here. If you have walnut on your property and you notice them having these symptoms of branch dieback, or maybe they're just not looking quite right, please give us a call and we can set up a trap or do some further investigations of your trees. And so, pathogens and fungus, they're kind of our worst nightmare when it comes to forest health. There's not really a lot in the toolbox for those, although things are being developed as we speak. So, how can you be a part of the solution? Well, there's always the old slogans of don't move firewood and buy it where you burn it, however you want to say it. Please be a part of the solution. Try not to move wood, whether it's firewood or, wood products around. And that will really help us out when it comes to these invasive pathogens as well as invasive insects. So yeah, don't help move these pesky hitchhikers around. And then just to wrap up here, who are you going to call? Please reach out to me. My email as well as my phone number is listed there. I am always more than welcome to answer questions or get you where you need to be. I might not know the answer right off the bat, but I will do my due diligence to get you the answers that you need. And then, of course, the Division of Forestry has 6 regional field offices all across the state of Kentucky. And so you can find your county here and reach out to that specific office, or I can help you get you to that office as well if it's a little hard to read. I know that's some small print there. And our foresters not only help with invasive species management plans, but maybe you're a hunter and you want to make your woodlands more robust for the white-tailed deer and turkey out there. They can help you with that too, and many other things. And so with that, if there's any time left, if we've got any questions out there.
Thank you, Alexandra. That was a wonderful presentation, getting a lot of comments about how awesome it was. So we really appreciate that. We don't have any time for questions, but we do, after the recording is stopped, we can answer them. If you don't mind sticking around, we can answer some of the questions that we've had people texting in the chat pod. So, but I want to thank you so much for doing this. It was a great presentation and gave us all the information and knowledge that we need. We'll have you on maybe and kind of talk about some of those individual bugs that you were talking about and trying to some of the invasive species, because I know there's a ton out there and we could probably do one every other show and you still would have plenty of time to talk about other things. But so right now I'm going to just go ahead and wrap up our show. If you have any questions about anything, you can email me at forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we greatly appreciate you doing that. If you have any ideas for story ideas, let me know. Maybe there's an invasive species you want to know a whole lot more about. Send me an email. Let me know which one it is, and we will get someone on to talk about that. You can always go to FromTheWoodsToday.com and see any past shows that we've had in the past, and we'll We'll have all of those there. Like I tell you every week, I think you can binge watch us for days if you'd like. So we greatly appreciate you, though, because we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for you. So please join us next week. We will have another edition of Wings of Kentucky and another watersheds topic. So join us next week, and we will see you then. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care, everyone.
From the woods today. From the woods today.